Hi, my name is Nalani Brown. I'm the philanthropy coordinator at Frank Toby Jones, and I'm picking up on chapter 35 this week of Rita Mae Brown and Sneaky Pie Brown's Cat on the Scent. Chapter 35. Where is that cat? Harry opened closet doors to make certain she hadn't shut the nosy Mrs. Murphy inside of one. The phone rang. Harry figured the caller was Miranda or Susan, early risers like herself. Sometimes Fair called after returning home from an all-night emergency. It was 6 o'clock. She'd been up for half an hour. Good morning, camper. Zip, zip, zip. We sing a song to start the day. Before Harry could launch into the second obnoxious lyric, Mrs. Hagendauber tersely said, "More violence." What? Mrs. Who's shop burned down. They think it's arson. I don't believe it. On the news, if you'd ever turn on your television, you'd just turn it on. It's the lead story on Channel 29. Her shop burned to a crisp. Roger, see you at work. Harry hung up, stretched over the counter, clicked on the small TV, which she hated with all her heart. Since Fair had given it to her for her birthday this year, she couldn't toss it out. High today expected to be 72 degrees Fahrenheit, a light breeze from the south, clouds moving in tonight, and a 50% chance of rainfall after midnight. Back to you, Trish. Robert Van Winkle, the weatherman, smiled. Soberly facing the camera, the young woman said, "Our top story this morning. Expert tailor shop behind Rio Road Shopping Center was burned to the ground last night. Nothing is left except the charred remains. Chief Johnson says..." The fire chief faced the camera in the tape from the night before. "We are fully investigating this incident. If anyone saw or heard anything out of the ordinary in the area around 2 o'clock in the morning, please call the fire department." He rattled off the number, which was shown on the screen. "Do you think it was arson?" Pure frustration on his face, Ted Johnson spoke directly into the camera. "We are investigating all possibilities," he repeated himself. "If any information concerning these events, please call our hotline. It's manned 24 hours a day." The number ran again several times at the bottom of the screen. "Then you have no leads." "I have nothing further to say at this point." He turned his back to the camera. "What in the holy hell is going on?" Harry exclaimed. "Mrs. Wu is the sweetest person in the whole country." Murphy popped out from behind the sofa where she was hiding. "Mrs. Hu had her shop torched," Peter yelled out. "I know, I heard the TV." "Where have you been?" Harry glared at Mrs. Murphy. "Hiding. I need to stay on the farm today." She was determined to attend the 3 o'clock meeting at Blair Bainbridge's. "Here." Harry opened another can of cat food. Peter sidled over to Mrs. Murphy. "Mariner's pride." "Butt out," Murphy growled. Harry scooped a big spoonful into Peter's oatmeal-colored crockery dish. "Upholstery Destroyer" was painted on Mrs. Murphy's dish, while Tucker's read, "Super Dog." "This goes back to the reenactment at Oak Ridge," Tucker stated. She sat down while the cats ate and Harry dialed Susan Tucker to discuss the latest news. "The new guys had to have uniforms made or altered in a hurry. Everybody went to Mrs. Wu. She knew who was in that reenactment," Peter said. "Yes, but so do Herb Jones, H. Vane Tempest, Rick Shaw. Each company commander has a list of men. That's what's sticking in my craw. We know." Mrs. Murphy pushed her food bowl away. Mrs. Wu had to know something. "It couldn't be unrelated, Tucker." Peter pounced on Murphy's rejected food. "Don't talk with your mouth full. Humans do that. It's vile." Murphy sniffed. "Miss Manners." Peter swished her tail once. "Listen to me, Tucker. You go with Mother. Stick with her no matter what. We've got to stay here today. Only one of you needs to go to the meeting. Both Peter and I need to read the map. Really study it." Mrs. Murphy sat still, like the famous Egyptian statue of the cat with earrings in its ears. "And why are you so worried?" Tucker cocked her head. "Because Harry found the airplane. My fault. And because Harry suggested checking out all the suppliers for Civil War reenactors. Remember? She mentioned gun sales, uniforms. She's eventually going to go one step too far." She'd better carry her gun, Peter sagely advised. Let's mention that to her. Mrs. Murphy rubbed against Harry's arm while she was speaking to Susan. Carry your sidearm. Peter's attention was diverted by the bold blue jay swooping by the kitchen window. Seeing Peter, he sailed straight for the window, then turned, feet first, wings flapping, while he threatened at the window. I hate that bird, Peter spit. Not my fave either. Come on, Murphy said. He returned for another pass, the bird version of giving the finger. Peter leapt at the window and smacked it. Come on, Peter. Murphy kicked her with her hind leg. Peter slid down off the counter. Leaping wasn't her first recourse. If she could put her front paws on cabinets and reach way down, sliding, then she'd hit the floor with less of a thump. Hitting all that lard made a big ba-boom. The three hurried into the bedroom. The bedroom door, usually closed, was open, since Harry was still in her robe. The .357 was in a hard plastic carrying case. Ugh, this thing is heavy. Murphy tried to push it out. Let's all three try. Tucker wedged in next to Murphy on the left, pushing over sneakers and an old cowboy boot. Peter was already on Murphy's right side. On three, Murphy called out. 1, 2, 3. Ugh! They all grunted, but succeeded in moving the gun case halfway out of the closet. She'd trip over it if she wasn't looking, and she had to go to the closet for her boots. Think she'll get it? Peter scratched behind her ear. Fleas? No, she angrily replied. Just an itch. Gray animals have more trouble with fleas, Mrs. Murphy pronounced this as solemnly as a judge. Ugh, you are so full of it. Peter swatted at Murphy. The two girls mixed it up. Tucker, no fool, stepped away just as Harry stepped into her bedroom. Hey! Two angry faces greeted hers. She started it. I did not. Mrs. Murphy defended herself. Don't you dare fight in my bedroom. The last time you knocked over Mom's crystal stag's head. Luckily, it fell on the carpet part of the floor. I love that stag's head. She bent over to fetch her boots. Take your gun, Peter said. Harry pushed the gray box back in, then stopped. She pulled it out and then opened it up. The polished chrome barrel shone. She liked revolvers. They felt better in her hand than any other type of handgun. Being a country girl, Harry had grown up with guns and rifles. She knew how to use them safely. Guns made no sense in the city, but they made a great deal of sense in the country, especially during rabies season. In theory, rabies occurred all year long, but Harry usually noticed an upswing in the spring. It was a horrible disease, a dreadful way for an animal to die, and a dangerous one for everyone else. Take the gun, Tucker panted from nervousness. Harry plucked out a clear, hard plastic packet of bullets. She laid the bullets and the gun on the bed, then pulled on her socks, stepped into her jeans, threw on her window-pane shirt, finally yanked on the old boots and slipped the packet into her shirt pocket. Although the gun was unloaded, she checked again just to be sure. Then she carried the gun to the truck and placed it in the glove compartment. She walked back into the house for her purse and the animals calling, "Rodeo!" Tucker bounded through the screen door. The cats followed, but then flew into the barn. Murphy, come on! Harry put one hand on the chrome handhold she had installed outside both doors so she could swing up. Forget it. Tucker sat on the seat. Finally, Harry dropped back down. She tugged into the barn. The horses walked up to the gate to watch. Harry turned them out first thing each morning. Blown or stack? Tomahawk said to Gin Fizz. Uh-huh. Pop-Tart joined them. Human explosions amused them so long as they didn't take place on their backs. Let's go. Harry stomped on the center aisle. Not a cat in sight, not even a paw print. Both cats hid behind a hay bale in the loft. A telltale stalk of hay floated down, whirling in the early sunlight. Aha! Harry climbed the ladder so fast she could have been a cat. Skedaddle! Murphy shot out from her hay bale, streaking toward the back of the loft where the bales stacked higher. Peter flattened as Harry tromped by, not even noticing her. Then the gray cat silently circled, dropping behind an old tack trunk put in the loft with odds and ends of bits brittles, and old tools. Harry craned to see around the bales. A pair of gleaming eyes stared back at her. Go to work. Come on out of there. No. She checked on her watch. Her father's old Bulova. Damn. Go on. I know you're saying ugly things about me. No, I'm not. Murphy didn't like Harry's misinterpretation of her meow. Just go on. Harry checked her watch again. You'd better be in that house when I come home. I will be. Me too, Peter called out. Harry put her hands outside the ladder and her feet, too, to slide down. As she walked toward the truck, a fat raindrop splattered on her cheek. The weatherman said it wouldn't rain until after midnight. Tucker, sitting in the driver's seat, said, he lied. The two cats, chapter 36. The two cats walked over to Simon's nest. He opened an eye, then closed it. I know you're awake. Murphy ticked the possum's nose with her tail. I'm tired. I was out foraging all night, he grumbled. In the feed room? Peter laughed. Go back to sleep. I'm borrowing this map that I stashed here. I'll bring it back. Fine. He closed his eyes again. They carried the map to the opened hayloft door, unfolded it, and studied it. It's the watershed, like you said. Peter sat on the counter. Wish I knew what the separate squares meant. Any ideas? No, they're in or adjacent to the watershed. Well, let's put this back. There may be a good time to show the humans. The blue jay streaked past the hayloft, spied the cats, and shrieked, Tuna breath! Peter lunged for the bird, but Murphy caught her. Don't let him bug you like that. Do you want to fall out of the hayloft? I will kill that bird if it's the last thing I do. Self-control. Complaining, Peter put the map in Simon's nest along with his ever-expanding treasures. The latest find was a broken fan belt. Mrs. Murphy, let's do nothing today. Nothing at all. Good idea. Chapter 37. The massive green Range Rover, outfitted for its owner with a hamper basket from Harrods, rolled down from Blair Bainbridge's driveway at precisely 2:55 p.m. Mrs. Murphy and Peter, halfway across Blair's hayfield, observed Sir H. at the wheel. He wore a bush hat, which offset his safari jacket nicely. Sir H. Vane Tempest never believed in buying a bargain when he could pay full price. He'd bought his attire at Hunting World in Paris. The French soaked him good. The brief morning rain had subsided, leaving a sparkling sky with impressive cumulus clouds tipping over the mountains. Peter loathed mud. She hated the sensation when it curled between her toes. She'd have to wait until it dried, then pick it out with her teeth. Mrs. Murphy, while not lax in her personal grooming, wasn't as fastidious as Peter. But then, Peter was a lustrous gunmetal gray, which showed any soiling, whereas Mrs. Murphy was a brown tiger with black stripes, her mottled coat hiding any imperfections. Peter felt that she was a rare color, a more desirable color than the tabby. After all, tabbies are a dime a dozen. The cats reached the porch as Sir H. Vane Tempest stepped out of his rover. He'd lost weight since the shooting and actually looked better than he had before. He'd been drilled with 3 holes. He knocked on the screened porch door. Come in, H. Blair walked out to greet him. Arch is in the living room. Mrs. Murphy shot through Blair's tall legs. Peter slid through too. Ah, you stinkers. He laughed. As Blair served drinks, Murphy and Peter edged to the living room. Vane Tempest noticed them when he entered the house, but he paid little attention. To him, cats were just dumb animals. Arch? Vane Tempest nodded. H. Arch replied coolly. How did you leave Sarah? I told you she'd do as I asked. A wrinkle creased his brow. Actually, Boom Boom came over to give her some soothing herbs. Don't look at me like that. It's what she called them, soothing herbs. She's still selling that herb stuff? What'd she call it? Aromatherapy? Yes, the girls are going on a shopping spree. Boom Boom will share her latest catharsis. I'll come home. Sarah will forget to be out of sorts, but she'll suggest that we both try Lifeline. That's Boom Boom's latest salvation. She's quite predictable. He laughed. Archie didn't laugh. I don't think any woman is predictable. Mine threw me out. Won't last. Make amends. Buy her a new car or something. I don't have that kind of money. Archie sourly turned and noticed Mrs. Murphy seated under the coffee table. You will. Blair, Archie called out impatiently. I'm coming. He returned with a silver tray bearing 2 Irish crystal decanters and 3 matching glasses. Sherry, if you're so inclined, or Glenlivet. Vane Tempest lovingly stared at the scotch, then sighed. A cup of coffee or even tea. Early for tea, but I'll brave it. Cutting back. He indicated the booze. Tea it is, Arch. I'm fine. What is that cat doing here again? Harry's cat. He didn't see Pewter. She had ducked behind a wing chair. I beg your pardon. Murphy brazenly strolled into the middle of the room. 2 days in a row. 2 days in a row. I guess I rate. Blair loved Harry's cats. Get Murphy out of here, Archie grumbled. Are you allergic? Vane Tempest politely inquired. To the damn cat? I am. She made a fool of me at that meeting. Hardly needing the cat for that, Vane Tempest dryly noted. I don't trust her. Something uncanny about her, Archie pouted. Blair scooped up Murphy. Come on, sweetie. I'll give you a treat, but outside. Murphy wrinkled her nose. You're an asshole, Archie. Then she called to Pewter. Hide under the sofa. I'll meet you outside later. Blair put Mrs. Murphy over his shoulder while Pewter squeezed under the large sofa. He intended to poach salmon for supper, so he sliced a bit off, then diced it while the tea kettle boiled. He placed a small bowl of the fresh salmon outside for the tiger. Murphy prowled around the cats. The windows were open. She might as well investigate the interiors. Once the tea was served, Vane Tempest got down to business. Since he had called this meeting, no one else could start it. I'll get straight to the point. Sarah wants to be a partner in Teotan Incorporated. Does she know what we're doing? No, Arch, she does not. Vane Tempest shot him a baleful glance. But she knows we're purchasing land. Did you tell her? Archie's right eye twitched nervously. No. She went through my papers when I was in hospital. Under the circumstances, that was normal. I told her the lawyers would handle everything, but that didn't satisfy her. She was terribly worried. Also, she doesn't trust my lawyers. Do you? Of course I do. Some of these men have served me for over 25 years. Sarah's feeling is that should the worst befall me, they won't work with her. They won't reveal to her the full extent of my holdings. She's worried about them stealing from her. His tone revealed curiosity as well as irritation. No, I don't think that's it. She wants to be in charge. The only way she can make intelligent decisions is to have accurate information. I never thought about it until she raised the issue, but I can see her point of view. Why can't you teach her about your investments without bringing her into Teotan? Blair asked sensibly. Oh, I can. Vane Tempest held up his hands, but she read some of the real estate transactions. She understands property, of course, so she wants to be part of this. She doesn't know the full significance of our purchases. I see. Blair poured himself a glass of sherry. He enjoyed the nut-like flavor. I tried to dissuade her. And what if we refuse her? Archie crossed his arms over his chest and leaned back in his chair. I don't know, he shrugged, but I do rather think. What's the expression? It's distasteful, but, yes, I think she'd better inside the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in. Blair and Archie remained silent for a moment. I sensed this unwelcome. Blair cleared his throat. A surprise. My concern is not a response to the purpose of our corporation. Sarah can appreciate profit as well as the next woman. He stroked his chin. My concern is, what would be her function? Whatever resources she puts into the corporation would, in effect, be your resources. Quite true. She hasn't a penny that doesn't come from me. And she'd have a vote. You'd control Teotan. Archie neatly summed up the situation. It does rather appear so, but I would never assume that Sarah would always agree with me. If you two present something sensible, she might be swayed. I don't know. I mean, there's little potential for disagreement. Our business plan is clear, but I understand your concern. It would throw Teotan out of balance. Archie rose, put his hands behind his back, and paced. She's bright. She's beautiful. Once Teotan goes public, she'd make hell of a spokesperson. People tend to trust women more than they trust men. Blair raised an eyebrow. Exactly what do you mean by going public? Not public issue stock, obviously. No, I meant when Teotan presents its plan to the County Commission. Who better to present it than Sarah? She's perfect. I never thought of that. Vane Tempest smiled. Blair poured him another cup of tea. Do you want her in the corporation? Quite frankly, at first, I did not. I was offended when she suggested it and put out that she'd read my papers. She'd had access only to the papers at home, but still. However, once she explained her fears, I considered what I would do in her circumstances. The exact same thing. Quite frankly, at first I did not. Oops. Having Sarah and Teotan at this late date? Blair paused. You would control the corporation after I've pumped in $750,000. That's... I understand. And Vane Tempest did. He was a businessman after all. You, Tommy, and I put in equal shares, and Archie put in sweat equity. We have, I forget the exact term, right of survivorship, in essence, to Tommy's share. We don't need another partner, and she'll be hell to live with. He wiped his brow. On the other hand, apart from being a spokesperson, she does have a way about her. Sarah could, how did Ridley put it one day? Could talk a dog off a meat wagon? He smiled. You people have such colorful expressions. You could put her in my place, Archie soberly suggested. She could cover my tracks. Your tracks are well covered, Archie, Vane Tempest spoke forcefully. An investigator would have to go through 2 dummy corporations in Bermuda, and there are no papers with your name on them. You're paid in cash. Eileen told me my career was over. Eileen doesn't have the facts, Vane Tempest flatly stated. What I've done is immoral. A flush covered Archie's angular face. Balls! The Englishman exploded. Spare me Eileen's refined morality. You've made a sound business decision. You supply us with pertinent information, connect us with the proper people in Richmond, and serve your county. Our plan will save Albemarle millions of dollars. He gestured expansively. And why shouldn't we be amply rewarded for our foresight? Buck up, Archie. Blair agreed with Vane Tempest, although he recognized Archie's moral predicament. Still, Archie had known what he was getting into. Archie mulled this over. Their plan would save the county money. It is a good plan, isn't it? We have Tommy to thank for the first glimmer. Blair missed the fun-loving Tommy. If he hadn't pushed me into flying lessons, I'd have never studied the watershed from the air. Nor would we have applied ourselves to underground streams and rivers. Vane Tempest perked up. The tea was giving him a lift. If one studies the land mass, one can pick out those depressions, those possible water sources. The fact that no one had considered this evidence of precisely how stupid elected officials are. Present company excluded, of course. He nodded to Arch. Some are dumb, others are on the gravy train. Archie's eyes glittered with anger. No one can tell me that fortunes won't be made with a reservoir, and those fortunes won't necessarily be made here. Outsiders will bid on the job, and oh, how interesting that state process can get. I've watched this bullshit mumbo-jumbo for years. All they do is waste money, sip on off a nice piece into their own pockets, and let the taxpayer pay through the nose. Right, which is why our plan of wells to service the northwest corner of the county is brilliant. Blair sat up straight. The wells we have already dug are moving at 88 gallons of water a minute. That's extraordinary. With the underground water we're tapping, we can service Free Union, Boonsville, Earlysville, that whole northern corner all the way to the county line. The only expense will be for constructing cisterns or water towers. And that's a hell of a lot cheaper than building a reservoir. The county buys the water from us at an attractive rate. If this works, which I know it will, We can do the same thing for the other sections of the county. But we'll have more competition. Other people will copy us and start buying up the land. Archie sat down again. There's talk about these wells being dug up. So far as I know, no one has figured out the purpose, but people will buy the land. Just wait. I'll attend to that. There's no reason we can't absorb some of these entrepreneurs into an umbrella corporation or create limited partnerships for, say, the southeastern corner of the county. We can worry about that later. On a roll, Vane Tempest continued. Your job, Arch, apart from keeping us informed on what's cooking at the State House, is to introduce the idea of floating a bond to set up those water towers and cisterns. I can't do that until you present your idea to the public, which is where Sarah comes in. Vane Tempest smiled without warmth. Let me think about this. I'm not saying no. I just want to think. Give me a week. Fair enough. Vane Tempest opened his palms, a gesture of appeasement. Now, another matter. Which one of us killed Tommy Van Allen? We all had something to gain. Stunned, Archie reacted first. That's a sick joke. As the men wrangled, Mrs. Murphy emerged from the Range Rover. She'd already investigated the 911, loath to leave it because it smelled so good. Being small, the Porsche took no time at all. The Range Rover, however, sucked up almost 45 minutes of precise sniffing and opening of compartments. Next on the list was the U-Haul. The U-Haul had an open back, like a stall with a Dutch door. It hadn't been unpacked. Looked like Archie couldn't make up his mind what to do. Once inside, Mrs. Murphy picked her way over the suitcases. One small desk and a chair. Her eyes were adjusting to the light. She noticed a cardboard box with a picture of handcuffs on the outside, haphazardly tossed into a carton. She pushed the box and something rattled inside. She opened it, but it was shut tight. Claws out, Murphy smashed into the cardboard full force. With her claws embedded all the way through the cardboard, she easily lifted the lid. A pair of shiny handcuffs, key in the lock, gleamed at her. The slapping shut of the porch door altered her to the approach of a human. The tiger scrambled over the desk chair, managing to propel herself out the back. She dropped onto the ground as H. Vane Tempest reached his car. Archie cursed on seeing her. If that cat peed on my stuff, I'm gonna kill her. Peter scurried out of the house, racing for the old graveyard. Vamoose! Mrs. Murphy flew down the farm road to catch her, Archie's curses still ringing in her ears. Chapter 38. The old gravestones, worn thin by time, stood out bleakly on the meadow's horizon. The buried were members of Herb Jones's family who had once farmed the land now owned by Blair Bainbridge. As this is the custom in Virginia, when land passes hands, family members nonetheless continue to care for the graves of their ancestors. Once a year, Herb righted tombstones, planted flowers, and trimmed the magnificent English boxwood hedge bordering the southwest side. Over time, Herb's bad luck hurt him more and more. Blair had begun to help tend the graveyard and to learn the history of the inhabitants. Blair mowed the lawn, pruned the trees, and trimmed around the edges of the stones. He performed his service out of respect for Herb, who had a large flock and not much help. The good Reverend's natural generosity meant that he had but little time for himself and even less money. Peter caught her breath on a flat gravestone set on graceful pyres. You won't believe what I heard. Well, I found handcuffs. You did? In the U-Haul. So it is Archie Ingram. Peter scanned the fresh green shoots in the field. How many people carry handcuffs? Cops and cop wannabes. Now listen to what those guys were talking about. The map makes sense. These marked off squares were where lands that they've bought through a corporation called Teotan. They've tapped underground rivers and streams. They're sinking wells on these properties, and the flow is so strong they can sell water to the county. The county will need to put up water towers or build cisterns, which are a lot better looking. This plan will save the county a mess of money and provide a good water supply for all of the newcomers. So far, no other humans have put two and two together, although the well drillers know a mess of wells are being dug. Where's the hole? There isn't one. I mean, except for Tommy Van Allen winding up as a frozen TV dinner. He was one of the 4 partners. And the most extraordinary thing, Sergeant Tempest said, "Which one of us killed Tommy Van Allen?" Archie screamed so loud I thought my eardrums would burst. He said H was sick to even say such a thing. Blair wasn't over fond of H's crack either. Sir H. Vane and Sarah wanted to come into the deal in place of Tommy. Sir H. Vane said Sarah wanted to come into the deal in place of Tommy. At first, Archie was opposed. Then he thought it over and said she might be a good spokesperson for when they go public. And Blair? He's not sure yet. He's afraid it will give the Vane Tempests all control over Teotan. And he's right, too. Mrs. Murphy, hearing geese, squinted into the sun. She spied the telltale V formation flying low. The rustling of the bird's wings was growing louder, just as quickly growing faint as the formation passed. I wouldn't want to be in Teotan right now. Me neither, Peter agreed. One partner hung on a meat hook and the other got blasted. The brilliance of their business plan is the money is steady. Millions will come in over the years. If they sold the land or the water outright to the county, they'd lose an enormous chunk of their profit to taxes. She shook herself, then squeezed through the iron fence around the graveyard. Blair's smarter than I gave him credit for. Smart? He'll be dead soon enough. Archie will control everything. They walked across the soft earth, crossing over the creek into Harry's hayfield. Tomahawk, Pop-Tart, and Jen Fizz, mouths full of Clover and Timothy, raised their heads, spotted their feline friends, then returned to grazing. Mrs. Murphy finally spoke. Blair isn't our human. He isn't our responsibility, but I do like him. I'm not risking my neck for anyone but Harry. No one is asking you to, but we do need to be alert. I'm inclined to help him up to a point. He's our next-door neighbor. That's what worries me. He's next door. Chapter 39. When Harry returned from work that evening, Mrs. Murphy was asleep on the sofa and Peter was dozing off by her food bowl. Tucker burst through the door to share the day's gossip. The cats, at first grumpy, woke up fully and told the corgi of their adventure. As they were filling Tucker in, Deputy Cooper drove up. She emerged from her squad car carrying Chinese food. Harry selected some of the morsels of chicken for the cats. Cynthia had thoughtfully brought a knucklebone from Market Shiflet's grocery for Tucker. Hear about little Mim's party? Harry shook her head since her mouth was full of chicken fried rice, so Cynthia continued. She's planning an apple blossom party. Impromptu. Ha! Harry replied, knowing that little Mim's version of impromptu meant a small army of workers at the last minute instead of a small army planning months in advance. Spontaneity wasn't a word associated with either Mim Sr. or Mim Jr. She's renting small tables, setting them out in the apple orchard, and she's hired a band. Her mother is lending her the outdoor dance floor. That takes an entire day to put together. Anyway, she's in a state. Where'd you hear about this? From the horse's mouth. I met her this morning to ask if she took clothing to Mrs. Wu, who turns out she doesn't, since Gretchen, Big Mim's utility infeedler, also does the mending. That's when she waxed eloquent about the party. Bet she doesn't invite me. She has to invite you. Cynthia grabbed pork lo mein with her chopsticks. No, she doesn't. Yes, she does, because if she doesn't, everyone will notice. She cares about appearances as much as her mother. Maybe I'll go and maybe I won't. You'll go. Since when have you missed a party? When I first separated from Fair. Forget about that. Hey, where's he been? Fowling season. From January through May, he's delivering the thoroughbred foaling season. From January through May, he's delivering the thoroughbred foals. When we were married, I'd sometimes go days without seeing him. There are other vets. He could have passed some of them work. No, he really couldn't. People have a lot of money tied up in a mare. First, there's the purchase price of the mare herself. If she's a thoroughbred with good bloodlines and of a good age, that could be, in these parts, anywhere from $5,000 to $30,000. Then there's the stud fee. Again, the price varies widely. So, when that baby hits the ground, some of the breeders already have $50,000 invested in it. For the hunter people, it's a little different, but still, it's not just money, it's emotion too. Fair's the best, so everybody wants him. There's a lot I don't know about the horse business. Incredible business, because it's not just money and it's not just the study of bloodlines. There's a certain something, a sixth sense. That's the hook. Otherwise, everyone could do it. Harder and harder to make money at it, though. Everything's that way. Do you think we'll live to see a revolution? Cynthia offered the rest of her lo mein to Harry, who refused, so she dumped it all on her plate. Yeah, but I don't know what kind of revolution. I do know you can't punish people for productivity and expect a society to last long. Right now, an American's answer is to work harder, but the harder he or she works, the more the government takes. Think of all the money we've already put into Social Security from our wages. By the time the whole system collapses, will we be too old to fight? Look at you and me, single woman in our 30s. Never too old to fight, Cynthia smiled. Think you'll stay single? Yes. I don't. You'll get married in the next few years. Nope. Harry shook her head for emphasis. I have nothing to gain from another husband. I'm not saying I won't have an affair, but really, what can I get from marriage except double the laundry? Cynic. Yep. If little Mim doesn't snag Blair Bainbridge, I think she'll have a nervous breakdown. Cynthia opened a brown paper bag filled with brownies. Dessert? Harry inhaled over the bag. Miranda. She didn't tell me she was making brownies. I stopped by after work. She happened to be making some for tomorrow, hot out of the pan. God, these are good. Harry bit into one. This business about little Mim and Blair is delicate. Blair and I are buddies. Nothing more to it than that, but it drives her bats. Yeah, well, his reticence about the situation doesn't help the matters. He likes you. Mrs. Murphy swallowed the last of her cashew chicken. More? Harry dropped another chicken bit on the plate. Hey! She dropped one for Peter, too. Tucker, engrossed in her bone, paid no attention to the Chinese food or the conversation. A joint bone required intense concentration. Blair's changed. Harry chose her words carefully since she knew Cynthia, like many women, had a crush on him. He's distant. You know, I thought it was just me. He didn't want to be bothered with me. Cynthia, he likes you. It's not you. He's worried about his age. After all, his work is his face. He's getting crow's feet around his eyes and a few gray hairs around the temples. Makes him look even better, I think. Me too, but models have a short shelf life. As he ages, he'll wind up in catalogs for tie companies. That's not the same as a spread in GQ. Never thought of that. It's bad enough when women worry about their looks. It seems somehow, she dropped for the right word, frivolous when a man does it. Yeah. Then again, Harry continued, I guess the money does dry up. He's invested wisely, I bet. I don't know. He never really talks about money. I just see how he spends it. Harry sighed. I can't imagine buying whatever I want when I want it. Me neither, Cynthia agreed. Of course, if he married little Mim, he'd never have to work another day in his life. Harry paused. I don't think he could do that. Too moral? Well, he likes beautiful women. Little Mim is nice looking, but she's not a Vogue model. Know what I mean? Yep. And when the woman has the bucks, the man dances to her tune unless she's a flat-out fool. And little Mim is not. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. Guess he'll never go out with me, Cynthia smiled wanly. Cynthia, Blair's nice enough, but you need a good old country boy. A man who isn't afraid to get his hands dirty. Oh, I don't know. Think you'll ever get married? Harry asked. I hope so. A horn beeping down the driveway broke the moment. Woo-wee, Susan Tucker called. Woo-wee, back at you. Harry didn't get up as Susan stuck her head through the kitchen doorway. Grab a plate. Cynthia's demolished all the pork lo mein, but there's lots of everything else. Needing no prompting, Susan did just that. Since you guys are on dessert, I'll assume everything else is mine. She smiled. Pig out, Suze. As she shoveled her food into her mouth, Susan's bright eyes danced. You won't believe what happened to me. Can't talk with my mouth full. We'll talk to you. When you slow down, you can tell us everything. Susan held up her hand, indicating that was a good idea, and kept eating. Mrs. Murphy jumped onto the kitchen counter. The sun was setting. A shaft of scarlet spiraled into the sky. Very unusual, just that one vertical column of color. She dropped down on the top of the closed plastic garbage can, then to the floor, and walked out the door. Peter and Tucker ignored her. Susan recovered enough to talk. I was on the 15th hole at Keswick. I like to play once a week there and once a week at Farmington. Actually, I'd play every day if I could, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, there I was, moving along at a pretty good clip when who should roll by me in her personalized golf cart but Sarah Vane Tempest. She was by herself, so I asked if she wanted to join me. She said no. She was on her way home. She'd lost track of time. She wanted to be there when H. Vane got home. She said she was furious with him because he was driving his car and she didn't think he should be doing that. Then she zoomed on by. Oh, she's overprotective. Harry reached for another brownie. Treats us like dirt, Cynthia shrugged. But then a lot of people do. And what do we have here? Susan noticed Mrs. Murphy carrying what looked like folded paper in her mouth. Peter stopped eating. Won't help. Murphy dropped the map at Cynthia Cooper's feet. She bent over to pick it up, carefully opening it. The name in the small block print on the right-hand corner read, Tommy Van Allen. Her expression motivated both Harry and Susan to rise out of their chairs and lean over her shoulder. Good Lord, Susan exclaimed. Harry picked up her cat and kissed her cheek. Where'd you find this, Pusskin? In the airplane. Cynthia traced the outline blocks with her forefinger. She quickly folded the map back up and headed to the door. Not a word of this to anyone, I mean it, not even a Miranda. Harry followed her out to the car as Susan cleared the table. Cynthia slid behind the wheel, buckled up, reached over onto the passenger seat, and gave Harry a folder. I came over so we could read this together, but I don't think it matters too much if you keep it for tonight. I'll pick it up from you at work tomorrow. She stared at the door. She started the motor. Do you have any idea where Mrs. Murphy could have gotten this map? Not one. Cynthia handed her the file labeled Barber C. Minor and drove off. Chapter 40. Oomph. Peter bit at her hind claws, trying to pull out the mud caked there. Why don't you relax? The stuff will fall out tomorrow, Mrs. Murphy advised. I'm not going to bed with mud in my claws. At least you're not complaining about how you came by it. Wish I'd been with you guys. Tucker lay down with her head between her paws, her expressive eyes turned upward to the cats, each which sat in an arm of the old wing chair. Harry was intently reading the file on her great-grandfather. You're good at what you do, Murphy complimented Tucker. Anything big happen in the P.O.? Peter yanked on another tiny pellet of mud. Reverend Jones said, elocution is on special foods to control her weight. Harry wrote down the information. Tucker gleefully directed this at Peter. Then Boom Boom and Sarah waltzed in. Major shopping spree, but Sarah said that even though she'd spent a lot of H. Vane's money, she was still mad at him for driving himself around. She thinks he should go slow, and after all, they can afford a chauffeur. Then Big Mim arrived for her mail, told Sarah to shut up and let her husband do whatever she wants. The worst thing she can do is make him feel like an invalid. So Sarah got mad and huffed out to the car. She said she had to go play golf. Boom Boom fussed at Mim, said Sarah had suffered a hideous shock. Mim told Boom to get a life and stop feeding off other people's tragedies. Then Boom huffed out, and Harry and Big Mim laughed themselves silly. That was my day. We told you ours. What's she so absorbed in? Tucker rolled over to reveal a sparkling white stomach, a tiny paunch growing ever more noticeable. Murphy moved to the back of the wing chair and read over Harry's shoulder. File, Barbara Clark Minor, a.k.a. Biddy, born April 2nd, 1890. Shot dead, May 30th, 1927. Born in Albemarle County, Duke University, B.A. 1911. Law School, University of Virginia. Left before receiving a degree. Enlisted in the Army. Saw action in France. Achieved rank of captain. Wounded 3 times. Awarded Bronze Star. Returned to Crozet. Finished law school. Entered practice from firm of Roscoe. Commons. Later Roscoe. Commons and Minor. Married Elizabeth Carhart, 1919. 3 children. Howard, born 1920. Ann, born 1921. Barbara Clark Jr., 1923. No criminal record. Killed by James Urquhart. Mr. Miner's widow did not press charges. Tucker broke into the cat's oration, saying, "You'd think Mrs. Miner would have brought charges. What else does it say?" Testimony of witnesses. Sheriff Hagendauber. Must be George's father or uncle or something. She referred to Mrs. Hagendauber's deceased husband, George. Anyway, the sheriff questioned 3 eyewitnesses, the first being Isabel Urquhart, Mim's mother. She saw Biddy drive up the Urquhart farm that morning of May 30th. She was being driven by her father to market. They had passed the Urquhart driveway and Biddy waved. Harry turned the page, absent-mindedly reaching up to tickle Mrs. Murphy under her chin. "Go on," Tucker urged as Pewter also moved to the back of her chair to read over Harry's shoulder. The second witness was James Urquhart himself, aged 19. The boy stated, "Mr. Miner called on me at 10 in the morning unexpectedly. One thing led to another. I lost my temper and struck him in the face. He hit me back. I usually carry a sidearm, copperheads, all over this spring. I pulled it out and shot him in the chest. He kept coming at me and I shot him again. He fell down on his knees and then fell over backward. When I reached him, he was dead." The third witness was Talia Urquhart, age 20. Mr. Miner called on me and my brother. "Mr. Miner called on my brother," she stated. "They had words. Jamie went into a rage and shot him." The third witness was Talia Urquhart, age 20. "Mr. Miner called on my brother," she stated. "They had words. Jamie went into a rage and shot him. He should have never shot Biddy Miner. He was such a nice man." 3 brown photographs of the body were neatly pasted on the last page. Biddy's stiff, prone body, blood spreading over his white shirt, his eyes open, glazing to heaven. But even in death, Biddy Miner was a fabulously handsome man. "That's it?" Tucker asked. Except for the 3 old photographs," Pewter added. "You've seen a lot worse." Harry closed the folder, crossing her legs under her. Not much of an investigation for a murder. You'd think Sheriff Hagendauber would have shown more curiosity, and you'd think Biddy's wife would have thrown the book at him. She thought out loud as the 3 animals hung on each word. Of course, the Urquharts were rich. The Miners were not. He admitted to the shooting, Pewter mentioned. She had an open and shut case. "Know what I think?" Harry leaned against the backrest. "A gentleman's agreement. And gentlewoman's. I bet Tally knows the truth." "Maybe," Mrs. Murphy listened. The owl hooted in the barn. "What's she babbling about?" "Who?" "The owl." Murphy crawled into Harry's lap before Pewter had the chance to think of it. "Calling for a boyfriend," Tucker giggled. "That's all we need. More owls," Murphy grumbled. "I'd rather have owls than blue jays." "Pewter, you are obsessed with that blue jay." Harry rubbed Murphy's ears so she purred the last part of the sentence. "Apart from the insults, the blue jays steal anything shiny. They're so greedy." Chapter 41. Rickshaw's ashtray overflowed with butts. As he absent-mindedly put a live cigarette into the deep tray, the whole mess caught on fire, a miniature volcano of stale nicotine and discarded ideas. Coop, laughing, trotted to the water cooler, filled a cup and dumped the contents onto the smoldering ashtray. She had prudently carried a paper towel with her to clean up the mess. "God damn it!" He stood up, knocking his chair over backward. "You'd set the place on fire. Not me, you grouch." "I didn't mean to. I meant me." "I didn't mean you. I meant me." "Boss, you take these cases too personally." "I liked Tommy. I liked Mary Wu. Hell, I can't even find out who burned her shop down, and she's too upset to remember anything to do with her records. Or maybe too scared. Yes, I do take this personal." He parroted Cynthia's incorrect English. "Come on, let's go home." She pointed to the wall clock. It was 2:30 in the morning. "No, not yet. Your wife probably forgets what you look like. Right now, that's good. I look like a vampire reject. One more time." He pointed to the map on the table. "What do these properties have in common?" Nothing I can tell. They aren't connected. They aren't on major roadways or potential road expansions. They aren't in the path of the Beltway in that the state threatens to build but never does. Just looks like speculation. Land speculation ruined Light Horse, Larry Lee, and plenty more. Like Rick, Cynthia knew her history, but most Virginians did. Before schools became relevant, teachers led you to the facts. If you didn't study them willingly, they simply pounded them into you. One way or the other, a Virginian would learn history, multiplication tables, the Queen's English, and manners. Then a child would go home for more drilling by the family about the family things, like Aunt Minnie believes that God is a giant orange. Other than that, she's harmless, so be respectful. God, I'm tired, Rick sighed. His mind was wandering. He sank back in his chair. Roger, Cynthia rubbed her eyes. Let me review this again. Mrs. Murphy brought you the map, dropped it right at your feet. Yes. Harry had never seen the map? No. Boss, I told you exactly how it happened. Mrs. Murphy walked outside and returned with the map. She was quite deliberate about it. She didn't give it to Harry. She gave it to me. If we ever go to court, what do we say? A cat gave us evidence? Sure looks that way. Cynthia smiled. She genuinely liked her boss. Let's keep this out of the papers. I can't bring myself to drag the pussycat into the glare of publicity. Where did she find it? We've gone over this. Behind the post office? Near the house? In the bomber jacket? The map could have been dropped anywhere, but wherever it was, Mrs. Murphy found it. Why would she bother to pick it up? He threw his hands in the air. Because cats love paper. Okay, next you'll tell me that she reads. That one, I wouldn't be surprised. She pulled the coroner's report over to her one more time and thumbed through it. Guess you have to release this. Yes, it confirms he was killed on the night he disappeared. And I guess I'll have to release the fact that he was loaded with cocaine. They'll have a field day with that one. You need to get some sleep before facing those reporters again. I need a lead, a clear lead. Rick pounded the table. We can start visiting these land parcels. Yep, he arose, sighed and clicked off the bright, small desk lamp. You're right, we both need sleep. They waved to the graveyard shift dispatcher. The cool night air, bearing a hint of moisture, smelled like fresh earth. Night, Rick. Coop? Yeah? Think H. Vane is on the drug trade? We don't know if Tommy was dealing. We only know he was full of the stuff. That's not what I'm asking. H. Vane loves a profit. She turned up her collar. H., Tommy, Blair, and Archie took flying lessons. I questioned Ridley too, but he wasn't in the club for long. Makes sense, he sighed. Well, let's both get some sleep. Then we can drive over the land marked on the map tomorrow. All right. I'm going to stop at chapter 42 of Rita Mae Brown and Sneaky Pie Brown's Cat on the Scent, and we will pick up here next week. I'm Nalani Brown, Philanthropy Coordinator of Frank Toby Jones. Thanks for listening.